Mr. President, I wanted to speak this afternoon on the very important vote that we took today to move forward on the defense authorization bill. And I thought I'd start by kind of backing up a little bit. You know, last week we had the opportunity to vote on and talk about funding for our veterans and our troops, in addition to the defense authorization bill that we voted on today to proceed to that. The votes we took last week were very important to the country, certainly very important to my state, which has a huge military presence, great state of Alaska, but also a huge veteran population. We proudly boast the highest number of veterans per capita of any state in the Union. I'm honored to have a good friend of mine, Representative Bob Herron. He's the majority whip in the Alaska House. He's in the gallery today, and he's also a Marine. So he represents not only Alaska in our state government, but Alaska as a veteran, as a fellow Marine. And you know, Mr. President, the American people want the Senate to be working again. We all know that the country has huge challenges. I'm going to talk about some of the national security and foreign policy challenges, but a huge debt, $18 trillion. I think we're close to $19 trillion. We got downgraded in terms of our credit rating, first time in American history. Can't grow the economy, huge challenges. But for years, the Senate was not working. It was not moving forward. Some would have called it dysfunctional. No regular order, no amendments, no budget, no appropriations bills, a lockdown U.S. Senate, not doing its work. And I think the American people wanted us to do work. So last fall, they said, hey, time for change. We need to get to work. We need to start tackling our challenges. So, Mr. President, we're changing that. We're working hard to do things that the American people sent us to Washington to do. We passed a budget, hasn't happened in years. Passed appropriations bills, regular order, Democrats and Republicans bringing amendments to the floor of the Senate, voting again. And one of the things that we've been doing, and it's happened today, we're prioritizing where they want us to prioritize. Our national defense, which is probably the most important role we have in this body. Our troops, our veterans. So we're making progress. But progress is halting. It's never a straight line. And for some reason, and we saw it the last couple weeks, a lot of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle didn't want to fund the government, particularly in terms of these critical issues of our troops, our national defense, taking care of our veterans. And again, we saw that the last couple weeks. Two critical appropriations bills moved to the Senate floor. There was the defense appropriations bill, which again passed out of the Appropriations Committee by huge bipartisan numbers, 27-3. Huge bipartisan support for that bill. Then we had the Veterans Affairs and Military Construction appropriations bill, passed out of committee 21-9. Huge bipartisan support. Why? Because the American people want us to focus on these critical issues. National defense, our troops, taking care of our veterans. So we're moving forward. Budget, appropriations bills that had been voted on and hadn't been voted on before for years. Bipartisan, prioritizing what the American people want. But then these bills, these appropriations bills, funding our vets, funding our troops, came to the floor and progress stopped. I still don't understand why. I've been asked by constituents, why did the other side vote to move these bills out of committee in such a bipartisan way, but then when they got to the floor, stopped. They filibustered. No spending for our troops, our vets. Mr. President, I don't even know the answer. I've asked, my constituents are asking, directions from the White House. Who knows? But I do think that it's clear to me, I think it's clear to most Americans, I even think it's clear to all the members of this body that when those bills were filibustered last 2 weeks, that our troops and our veterans were shortchanged because we are voting to defund them. That's what we're voting. That's what the filibuster did, to defund our troops and our veterans. So I have to admit, when we were getting ready to vote today, I feared a bit of a repeat. Repeat performance on probably one of the most important bills we're going to take up all year, the National Defense Authorization Act. It authorizes spending, pay raises, sets out our military strategy, retirement reform. It is so important to our country. And I want to commend, once again, Chairman McCain and Ranking Member Reed, the two leaders of the Armed Services Committee who did such a good job moving that bill forward. And once again, it started with such great bipartisan promise. Moved out of committee 22-4. Very bipartisan. Then it came to the Senate for a vote a few months back, the NDAA, Defense Authorization Bill. 71 U.S. senators, incredibly bipartisan, moved forward, voted for that bill. Then it went to a conference with the House, it was improved, and all seemed to be on track to bring this bill back to the floor of the U.S. Senate and to vote on moving forward on it again. The conference report. What happened? That's great bipartisan progress. We are changing things. We are making things happen. The President of the United States then said he was going to veto the bill. He was going to veto the bill. Veto the Defense Authorization Act. And once again, and I'm not sure if taking orders from the White House or not, the minority leader came to the floor and told the American people this morning he would work with the president to sustain that veto. To sustain the veto of our defense bill. What a disappointment. What a disappointment. We have this huge bipartisan progress when given the clear choice between standing with our troops and our veterans, or the president who says he's going to veto this bill for reasons I still don't understand. The minority leader is choosing the president. Now, Mr. President, I am honored to sit on the Armed Services Committee of the United States and the Veterans Affairs Committee. And as I said in remarks last week on the Senate floor, these are two of the most bipartisan Senate committees that we have. It's clear to me that every member, Democrat, Republican, of these committees cares about our troops, respects our troops, cares deeply about our national security. And I believe every member of this body does. And once again, we saw that today. We saw that today. There was no filibuster. 73 U.S. senators voted to move forward on the defense appropriations bill. It was 71 before, now it was 73. Important bipartisan victory for our national defense, for our veterans, for our troops. But that presidential veto still hangs out there. The president's veto threat still is like a cloud hanging over this very important vote today. Mr. President, I mentioned at the outset, this is very important for my state, the great state of Alaska. This is important for the national security of our nation, and this is important for all of us. It's important to me. As a veteran, as a Marine who's in the reserves, this is a critically important issue. And I don't know how the Commander-in-Chief will explain, if he's going to veto this bill to the American people and to our troops, why he's doing it. There's only been 4 times in the last 53 years that the NDAA has been vetoed. providing the common defense of this nation, the national defense, is probably our most important duty. And that duty increases when you look around the world and see the threats that are emerging in different parts of the world. The Middle East, Ukraine, in the Asia Pacific, in the Arctic. Mr. President, to govern is to choose. To govern is to prioritize. The President's administration spent years negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran. And this body spent weeks debating the merits of the President's Iran deal. That deal, and what we debated then, needs to be put in the context of the President's veto threat to the Defense Authorization Bill. Let me give a few examples. The President's Iran deal will give billions, tens of billions, in lifting of sanction to Iran, the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. But the President threatens to veto a bill that will fund our military. The President's Iran deal lifts sanctions on Iranian military members, such as General Soleimani, who literally is responsible for the maiming and killing of thousands of American troops. But the President's veto, his threatened veto, would stop payment of bonuses and improve military retirement benefits to our troops and veterans. The President's Iran deal gives access to the Iranians by lifting sanctions on conventional weapons, ballistic missiles, and advanced nuclear centrifuges. But the President threatens to veto, in this bill, advanced weapon systems for the United States. And the President's Iran deal gives the opportunity for terrorist groups supported by Iran, like Hezbollah and Hamas, to have further funding for their terrorist activities. But he threatens to veto a bill that provides additional funding and resources and capability for our troops to defeat ISIS. To govern is to choose. To govern is to prioritize. As we move forward on the substance of the National Defense Authorization Bill, we are choosing and prioritizing our troops and our national defense. And that's why this vote was so positive this morning. I hope that we can have at least 73 senators who voted to move forward today to vote to pass the NDAA and put it on the President's desk for his signature. But if the President chooses to veto this critical piece of legislation that has enormous bipartisan support at this moment in time when our country faces serious international threats, I hope that my colleagues, the 73 senators who voted to move forward on this critical piece of legislation, will also stand strong and vote to override the veto of the President, which is exactly what our troops and the American people would want us to do. Mr. President, I yield the floor.